Welcome to Feminism Today, everyone. I'm Sophia Johnson in New York. Marion Nestle's latest book, Slow Cooked, An Unexpected Life in Food Politics, was released by the University of California Press recently. The book is a reflection on her late-in-life career as a world-renowned food politics expert, public health advocate, and founder of the field of food studies following decades of work. Professor Nestle, welcome to Feminism Today.
I'm glad to be here.
It was a tongue twister. I have really never met a more cited scholar in the food and nutrition space. Wow, and congratulations.
Thank you.
You've written 15 books, and your research has really left an indelible mark on how we think about food, food politics, and how we think about nutrition. Why did you write a memoir?
Well, the pandemic was the first reason. My partner lives upstate in Ithaca, New York, and I moved up there during the pandemic. Oh, I needed a project really badly. And usually I write nonfiction books that are heavily researched, that require lots of time in libraries and lots of interviews and lots of kinds of things that you just couldn't do during the pandemic. So I tried to think of something that I could do. And I thought, well, maybe the time has come to answer the questions that I get asked all the time about how did I do this? How did you become involved in food politics? How did you get interested in this? Why did it take you so long? What should I do to be you? Those kinds of questions. So that's what I did.
Sounds like a fun project.
I consider it my first work of fiction.
I love it. I love it. So you've said elsewhere, you've said here, just now, you get asked a lot of questions. And so the question I have for you is, why is nutrition so confusing? It's one of the questions you get all the time. So please share with us.
So, well, it's confusing because everybody wants it to be confusing. I actually think that it has to do with the fact that there are lots and lots of nutrients, probably 50 essential nutrients that you absolutely have to eat in order to live. They come from foods. There are thousands, tens of thousands of different kinds of foods that you have to choose between. An average supermarket has 50,000 foods, so you've got lots of choices or apparent choices. And it's $1 trillion a year business in the United States alone. So that there's a huge amount of money involved in food companies getting you to eat their product instead of somebody else's. So the politics come into it from the get-go. There are lots and lots and lots of vested interests. And the research is very hard to do. It's really, really difficult to find out what people are eating, to get an average idea of what people are eating, because diets differ so much from day to day, from individual to individual. And so it appears confusing, which is too bad, because the journalist Michael Pollan can summarize everything you need to know about dietary advice in 7 words. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants.
I'm definitely not good at following that prescription. Why is it so hard to know which foods are good for me, good for us?
Well, it's the same reason, because the research is difficult to do, because there are so many of them, and because if you're looking at one food in a diet in which people eat dozens and dozens and dozens of foods on one day and then a completely different set the next day, it's very hard to do that kind of research. And one food can hardly make that big a difference in your diet unless you're eating a very restricted diet where you're low in essential nutrients and not getting enough of what you need. But that's not a problem for Americans. The biggest nutritional problem for Americans is eating too much.
Is that really the central issue, eating too much? And is it eating too much of what? Is it processed foods?
Eating too much in general, because 74% of American adults are considered to be overweight by CDC standards.
Hmm.
So that's whatever. It doesn't matter what you're eating if you're eating too much of it. And
Hmm.
then people eat too much of the wrong kinds of foods. And
Hmm.
um, when Michael Pollan says eat food, he means real foods. He doesn't mean processed or what are now called ultra processed foods.
Hmm. I mean, you mentioned something a little bit earlier, and I want to sort of zero in on it. The idea that there's almost the appearance of a lot, like a diversity of foods. What did you mean by that?
Well, if you go into a supermarket, I'm thinking of salad oils, for example. There are supermarkets that have whole aisles devoted
Mm.
to salad oils. You only need one.
Yeah, yeah.
Some of them are better than others, and some of them are more expensive than others, but basically you only need one. Why
Yeah.
do you need a whole aisle of them? And is that a real choice?
Mm.
Or if you go to the cereal aisle, and I love the cereal aisle because it's extremely entertaining. Um, there are many, many, many different products, but they're basically all alike.
Mm.
I mean, they have a lot of sugar, and some of
Yeah.
them have more fiber, and some of them have different shapes, and some of
Mhm.
them have different colors, but they're
Mhm.
basically all the same. So those are apparent choices. They're not real choices.
Is it possible for nutritionists, for health experts like yourself, food experts like yourself, to advocate in a more, I don't know what it would take to get the corporations to sort of rethink what they're doing to the health of consumers?
Well, the first thing to understand is that food companies are not social service agencies, and they're
Mm.
not public health agencies. They're businesses. Their job is to make money, and their job is to maximize profits for stockholders. That's their fundamental goal. If
Mhm.
they don't maximize profits for stockholders, their stockholders get very cross. Um,
Wow.
and that is difficult for the CEOs. Wall Street doesn't like it. They get
Mhm.
into a lot of trouble if they're not increasing their profits every 90 days and reporting those increases to Wall Street. And that, I think, is the fundamental problem. I think there
Mhm.
are plenty of people in food companies who would like to make healthier foods, who would
Mhm.
like to stop marketing junk foods to children,
Mhm.
but feel that they can't because their fundamental fiduciary responsibility to stock
Mm.
is to make money. This is
Mhm.
about capitalism. This isn't about public health.
Yeah, but I wonder if we could talk a little bit about the quality of food that we're seeing. And even now, there's the 3D printing, there's all this. I mean, what's your sense of what's happening to just the mechanization of this whole space? What is your sense of what are we doing with ourselves?
Well, again, you're asking a question about where the money is.
Mm.
Um, Food is a generally low profit item, except for the heavily processed, ultra processed foods that are the ones that we're not recommending these days. Um, but if you want to make money in the food industry, you're up against a very difficult problem, which is that food is overproduced in the United States. There are 4,000 calories available for every man, woman, and little tiny baby in the country. On average, that's twice what the population needs. Probably 2,000 calories a day would cover the needs of the population on
Mhm.
average. So if you're a food company trying to sell a product in an environment in which there are 4,000 calories a day available per capita, you've got a really tough job.
Mm.
You've either got to convince people to buy your product instead of somebody else's, or to eat more in general. And
Mm.
the eating more in general turned out to be pretty easy to do. And that's, I think all you have to do is look at larger portions that
Mhm.
started being introduced in the 1980s. And that's a sufficient explanation for why people gained weight. If I had one thing I could teach everybody, it would be
Yeah.
larger portions have more calories.
Good grief. It is quite sad. It's just quite overwhelming. I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about, just give us a little bit of lowdown. Go deep for a moment, not, about this book. I'm holding on to this because it's kind of been my guide, but what to eat. Tell us about what constitutes a nutritious meal. What do consumers need to really know about what is a nutritious meal if they really don't know?
Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. I mean, it really isn't any more complicated than that. Once you understand that a food is something that is, well, I don't know, real or
Yeah.
whatever. It's meat, dairy, vegetables, fruits,
Yeah.
grains, beans, whatever, fish, eggs, whatever,
Yeah.
that haven't been highly processed. And you don't eat too much of them, and you make sure you have a lot of vegetables in your
Hmm.
diet. You've taken care of it.
Hmm.
I mean, that takes care of your if you're eating a variety of those kinds of foods and varying them from day to day, and from meal to meal, you're taking care of your nutritional needs. The biggest problem in American diets is not vitamin deficiency. It's
Hmm.
eating too many calories.
Wow. One of the things I love about your work is that you sort of made no bones about it. You sort of took on the politics of food. You took it on head on, but you also took on the pet food industry, which is amazing. And once people caught wind of the fact that I was going to talk to you, they're like, "You have to ask her about pet food." And so it was perfect because you've written a book about such a subject. So you examined the $18 billion pet food industry in your book. Feed Your Pet Right. This book began when you couldn't understand the ingredients on pet food labels. What did you mean by that?
Well, pet food labels are labeled like animal feed. They're not labeled like food, like human foods. They don't have nutrition facts labels. The ingredient lists are the same, but
Mhm,
none of the other information is the same. And I
mhm,
couldn't understand it, but my partner in life had been trained in animal nutrition. So
mhm,
he knew how to read animal feed labels. And
mhm.
we ended up writing a book about pet food. I have to say, I love talking about pet food. It's really fun. It's just really fun
Yeah.
because pet food isn't sold to dogs and cats.
No.
It's sold to their owners, and it's sold to their owners on exactly the same basis that
Yeah.
the sellers of human foods try to sell
Mhm,
foods.
mhm,
You
mhm.
know, the dogs and cats couldn't care less what color the pet food is,
Yeah.
but the owners do. And they don't care what size or shape the kibble is, but the owners do.
Yeah.
So the whole pet food industry is set up to appeal to very strong food prejudices of people who have household pets. And household pets used to be treated like animals. You know,
Hmm.
now they're four-footed members of the family,
Truth. Truth.
um, and no expense is spared.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really fun.
Yeah, it really is quite funny. So the research in the book also examines the politics, marketing, and science behind pet food. Can we talk a little bit about um, what's going on in terms of addressing the food needs of 172 million cats and dogs in the United States?
Well, the companies that make the foods, first of all, pet food is like infant formula. They have to meet the specific nutritional needs um, of dogs and cats, and they're formulated to meet those needs. And there's a lot of regulatory agencies and advisory agencies that are involved in setting those standards. And every single complete pet food, whether it's in a can or a bag, that's labeled as complete by AFCO standards, the
Yeah.
Association of American Feed Control Officials. They're all the same because they
Mm,
all have to meet the same nutritional standards. In that way, they're just like infant formula. All infant formulas have to meet exactly the same nutritional standards. So the companies have to differentiate their products in some other way. Um,
mm,
and and so they try to do that through market segmentation, through advertising the ingredients that the
mhm.
pet foods come from. But really, they're all the same.
Yeah, yeah.
And there is no research to suggest that the most expensive canned pet food made from the most expensive ingredients is any better for a pet's health than the cheapest one. They're just that research just doesn't exist because the pet
Mhm.
food companies don't do it.
Right. Give us a cheat sheet then. What should we look for on the label of our pet food?
Well, I don't think it matters because they're all the same. Yeah, you look to make sure that you have a complete pet food. If you're not going to cook for your pet yourself, or you're not a wealthy person and you're going to buy prepared meals for your pet,
Hmm.
um, and those are kind of amazing because there are now lots of companies that are doing that.
Hmm.
And also, you could go into Petco and they've got a kitchen in there where they'll cook a meal for your pet.
Hmm.
For that, you have to have a lot of money. Um,
Hmm.
but if you're just buying the usual pet foods in bags or cans, I
Hmm.
don't think it makes any difference which one you buy, as long as you're buying it for the right age and the right size and all of that kind of thing.
Hmm.
I mean, if they say all life stages, you have to read the label. If
Yeah.
they say all life stages, you can feed it to a puppy or an old dog. If they say adults, it's got to be an adult. I don't think the breed ones make any difference. That's a pretty funny way to do market segmentation,
Yeah.
is to produce different pet foods for different
And I
breeds of
see
dogs.
that a lot. And so you don't know. The consumers are completely confused as they are with their own human food. But so I guess you're saying that there's no truth to the claim that some foods are for aging pets or specific breeds or puppies. Some foods are for weight
Well,
loss,
yeah, I mean,
organic premium.
puppies need different nutrition, have different nutritional needs than adult dogs. But you can, if the pet food says for all life stages, it covers that. And
Mm,
at some point, they did research to show. I mean, most dogs and cats in America are fed on commercial food,
mhm,
and some of them do okay, some of them don't do okay.
mhm.
But the kind of research that you'd really like to have, which is, I would like to see the most expensive pet food compared to the least expensive and see what happens.
Yeah,
But nobody wants to do that kind of research.
yeah.
Um,
I wonder how much impact or what has been the response of the pet food industry to your research and your work?
well, they haven't. I've never gotten a response. I mean, certainly
Hmm.
the veterinarians didn't like our book very much.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, we were a little critical of veterinarians. I mean, in part because they're not really taught about nutrition. And at the time that we wrote the book, pet food companies were doing all of the nutrition teaching, and they also were giving veterinarians who had pets free food for their pets for the whole time they were in veterinary school, which seemed to me to introduce some conflicts of interest.
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, some of that has changed, but from the veterinary idea, you don't really need to know a lot about nutrition because all you have to do is pick the product
Yeah,
that the pet food companies have made that is appropriate for the situation that you have. And you write a prescription for it. And, there's some prescription diets that you have to get a prescription from your veterinarian to use.
yeah,
Those usually cost 2 to 4 times what a
yeah,
regular pet food would cost. Sometimes they have things in it that would make a difference. Sometimes they don't.
yeah. One last question on the subject of pet food before I get off the subject. What foods are deadly for pets? Are there any foods that are deadly for pet? Should we be concerned about traces of melamine in China in pet food?
Well, not anymore. The melamine, which is plastic dinnerware, was substituted for wheat gluten as an ingredient in pet food. This happened in 2007.
Yeah.
Um, and this was very bad for pets' kidneys, and pets were dying as a result. And that was what was amazing about that was that more than 100 brands of pet food had to be recalled because of that.
Mm.
Any pet food that had wheat gluten in it that came from China had to be recalled, and it turned out there were more than 100 brands affected, and they were all made at the same contract manufacturer. So
Unbelievable.
that was a big revelation, was
Yeah,
that
yeah.
one place made all these different foods, and the recalls affected expensive ones and affected cheap ones and everything in between.
Mhm.
That was kind of shocking to find out. I don't think melamine is a problem because people are checking it now.
No.
But there are other things that dogs and cats are not supposed to eat. Chocolate is high on the list. Some people say that onions and garlic is bad for them.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. I'm not impressed. I mean, I think if they eat a lot of it, maybe it's not so good, but a little bit, I can't imagine would make any difference. But why would you feed your pet chocolate anyway? Not a good.
Well, I guess you have to have a conversation with my sister because her Shih Tzu seems to eat everything, but that's another conversation.
Well, there are
um,
dogs that eat everything.
yeah, yeah.
They
So
do.
they really do.
They do.
Let's talk a little bit about pivot back to human food. Why do you think there was such a big kerfuffle about former First Lady Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign and the administration's task force on childhood obesity?
Well, shall we start with the fact that she's Black? And
Start
that's a
there.
problem to begin with.
Yeah.
Um, it was interesting because it seemed to me that she had made a very deliberate decision to pick a topic,
Hmm.
feeding kids in schools, that you would think would be
Hmm.
completely bipartisan.
Hmm.
Who would not want school children to eat healthfully? I
Yeah.
mean, it's really hard to imagine that there would be somebody who would said, I want to feed my kids junk food in schools.
Hmm.
I mean, really hard to think about that. So she picked something. I thought it was brilliant that she picked something that she thought would be bipartisan and everybody would get behind. And instead, it turned out to be terribly, terribly political.
Yeah.
And there was enormous pushback on it, which I thought was a shame. Excuse
Yeah.
me, I'm going to
Yeah.
cough for a
Yeah.
minute.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah, it really was a travesty. What role do you think government should play in combating something, a major health issue like obesity?
Well, I think that's government's role.
Yeah.
It's government's role to make sure the population is educated, healthy,
Hmm.
um, and can live safe and healthful lives. It
Yeah.
seems to me that's a major function of government, and
Hmm.
how we've gotten to a point where things are so polarized that there are people who think government shouldn't be involved in
Hmm.
that seems just amazing to me.
It really is amazing. Let's
Oh,
go
and
back
healthcare.
to the
Let's put
memoir. Do you
let's
need a
put
minute?
healthcare into that too.
Say again?
Let's put healthcare into that too.
Into that too. That's going to be another 30-minute conversation. Let's go back to the memoir. What did you need to get out there that you hadn't said already through all your research and your books?
Well, I think it was the personal stuff. I mean,
Mhm.
my personal story about how I
Happened upon this
came,
career?
how I happened to have the career that I had. Everybody's personal story is individual,
Yeah.
and and I hear from I hear from students all the time that they're in school and they don't know what they want to do. And they can't imagine how they're going to figure that out.
Yeah.
And so my story was one that they can look at and think, gee, took her a long time.
Yeah, yeah,
If it
yeah.
takes me a long time, maybe I can do good things too.
Yeah. I love the title though, Slow Cooked. How did you come up with that? I mean, growing up, my grandmother used, I don't know if a pressure cooker. And
Uh-huh.
so I love the idea of slow cooked, that you were marinating. How did you come up with this title?
I don't know. I was out in my kayak one day and it just came to me.
Yeah.
Um, I thought I wanted a food title
Yeah.
because, I write about food.
Yeah.
And it just came to me and I thought, that will do. So the title is Slow Cooked and Unexpected Life in Food Politics.
Yeah.
And I think that describes what's in it pretty
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. Now, every year, people make resolutions on the ways they should prioritize health and nutrition. What do people generally get right or wrong about nutrition?
Well, I think the fact that people think that nutrition changes all the time
Yeah.
is something that I think is unfortunate, because if you look at dietary recommendations that were put forth in the
Hmm.
1950s to prevent heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, obesity, etc.,
Hmm.
those that advice is exactly the same as the United States dietary guidelines are
Yeah.
putting forth now. Eat more fruits and vegetables. Don't eat too much junk food.
Yeah.
Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. I mean,
Yeah.
really, that's what it is. And so that advice hasn't changed. Where the fuss is about specific nutrients, carbohydrates versus fats. That's a huge one,
Mhm.
where the research is very, very difficult to do because people don't eat carbohydrates or food or fats. They
Yeah.
eat foods containing them for the
Mhm.
most part.
Mhm.
And the minute you get into foods, you're into diets, you're into dietary patterns, and you're into something that's almost too complicated to study. And
Mhm.
I think that's the basis of the difficulty. And so, yeah, eat eggs, don't eat eggs.
Yeah.
Eat fat, don't eat fat. Now there's a big push to try to get people to not worry about meat so much. And
Yeah.
you have to look at who's behind that.
Yeah.
Because again, food companies have this terrible problem of trying to sell their products in a situation in which there's too much food available.
Yeah.
So the trade associations for various kinds of food commodities, and food companies are always trying to find a way to demonstrate that their foods are good for you and you should buy them instead of something else.
Mhm. What should healthy habits around food and nutrition, advocacy and activism look like in 2023?
Well, I think it should look like eat food, not too much, mostly plants. I'm sorry to keep saying that over
Yeah.
and over again, but I think that formulation does a lot to explain what would work. I mean, first of all, food is one of life's greatest pleasures. You
Yeah.
want people to enjoy what they're eating and not worry about it and not feel like food is poison or
Yeah.
food is your enemy, or be paralyzed by trying to make a choice at a supermarket.
Yeah.
People ask me all the time, do you eat junk food? Of course I eat junk food. I like junk food just like everybody else does.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just try not to eat too much of it. And I'm able to do that. Not everybody is able to do that. I'll
Yeah.
grant that. But I think you should eat foods you like
Yeah.
and enjoy it because it's so much fun and
Yeah.
so pleasurable. I mean, it's what other pleasures like that do we get to do several times a day?
I don't know. I don't know, but I do have a new motto: eat food, not too much, mostly plants.
Give Michael Pollan credit for that. It's not mine, unfortunately. I wish it were.
It was such a pleasure to have you here with us. Marion Nestle's latest book, Slow Cooked: An Unexpected Life in Food Politics, was released recently. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's been really nice to talk to you.
Thank you. And that's it for our program today. Remember, you can follow me and the show on Instagram or Twitter. Thank you so much for watching Feminism Today on Free Speech TV. Join us again next week.